just want a trousers tutorial that's actually easy to follow, where you know why you're doing what you're doing, well, you're in the right place at the right time. Hi, wonderfully created, and welcome back to CreatedIAm. As always, check out the description box so you can use the timestamps to jump exactly to the moment you need. This is a highly requested video. I'm going to take you from the start all the way to the finish. We are going to measure ourselves. We are going to draft a trousers block, and we are going to sew it, even with a zip. And I've done my research and simplified this down so you can use previous techniques that you know, so that we demystify the complexity of sewing a trousers. In this video, we're going to focus on the important step of measuring ourselves. On the screen, you're going to see the tools that you will need. To highlight one or two, having a notepad or a laptop to record your measurements. Measure yourself before you start any drafting and double check those measurements. That is so important, so you avoid having errors in your measurements that can really affect your trousers. A French ruler, the white transparent one on the screen, is optional. You can freehand your curves, but it makes life so much easier. You're also going to want to have a pencil or pen. A pencil is nice because you can correct your errors, and then use a pen for your final lines. Find some paper. If you can write on it, you can draft on it. And I do recommend you use a pen, and I'm going to show you why later. Some measuring tips. You would not want to go through 4 or 5 hours of work, maybe a couple of days of work, and come out with trousers that don't fit you. So, number 1, you can decide which units you use, inches or centimeters. As you'll see, I tend to switch based on what I prefer. If you have a tape that has both, that's even easier. Number 2, wear something that is fitted and not too loose. If it's too loose, that might affect the measurements you collect. Number 3, circumference means roundabout. I know this might seem like an obvious one, but some people just may not know. A vertical measurement is something going down up or up down. Number 4, if you are taking circumference measurements, do make sure they are horizontal to the ground. It's very easy to accidentally make it slanted, which will mean that your measurement will probably be more than what you need. To help you, have a mirror in front of you. Number 5, if you're a beginner doing this for the first time or want to make sure your measurements are as precise as possible, my tip is to actually grab a trousers piece that is similar to the one you're trying to sew and measure those as if they're your actual trousers. Then you can check that with your measurements, and if any of the measurements are way off, it gives you a slight indication that something's gone wrong. At the end of this video, I am going to show you how to compare your body measurements to a trousers piece you already own. It is time! Let's measure our bodies. First, you want to decide how thick you want your waistband to actually be. My thickness is going to be 1 inch. That's what I recommend. You can go up to 2 inches, but keeping it at 1 will avoid creasing or having too much space at the waist. Next, you want your waist circumference. This is normally the smallest part of your tummy, but it's where you want your trousers to end. Wrap it round and use your mirror to make sure it is horizontal to the floor. You should be able to squeeze in 1 finger without much issues. If it's too tight, you won't be able to breathe very well. If you clamp down that measurement on your tape and do the food test, where you puff your belly out and in, because you are going to eat, guys, you can use that to check that it's also comfortable. Next, we want to take our hip measurement. This is the widest part of your bum area. Take the tape and wrap it all the way around. For this measurement, you can do the sit test and check that it's comfortable. If you're having this bunching or this creasing happening at your bum, that's a clear sign that it's way too tight. You should be able to get 1 finger in, but if you're getting your whole hand inside, then it's way too loose. You can record this or get someone to help you record it, but keep in mind where the tape ends. You can mark this with a chalk or place your finger and hold that spot, because your next measurement is your hip to your waist vertical length. From that point where your finger was on your hip, take your tape and lay it upwards till you hit where your waist was. Mine was around my belly button. The next couple of measurements are very important. They center around our crotch. The first measurement we're going to take is the crotch length that wraps around your crotch. We're going to also take the front crotch length. We're going to take the crotch depth. Then later on, at the end of the measuring section, we'll talk about the crotch extension. To measure your crotch length, you want to start at the front in the middle where your waist is, which might be your belly button, and then wrap it all the way to the back where your waist ends. I placed my 0 at the back, wrapped it to the front, found my measurement, and then recorded it. Next, we're going to do the front crotch length. So, if you're wearing some trousers, find where the middle of the seam is at the bottom under your crotch, and then start from there and measure it to your belly button or the center of where your waist ends at the front. Record that down. If you take your whole crotch length and take away this front measurement, it will automatically give you the back. If you want to, you can measure the back again, but it should add up to the same thing if you've done it all correctly. Next is the crotch depth. That's how deep your crotch is from your waist to the bottom. To find this correctly, you want to sit down on a hard surface, not a soft one. So ideally a table or something like that. Take your tape upwards vertically to where your waist circumference is for your trousers, and then record this measurement. Once you've written this measurement down, write down crotch depth plus 1 inch and actually add 1 inch to this measurement. I recommend you do this because it gives you enough ease in that area so that it's not too fitted. You want space for you to move around. Your bum is a curvy thing. Next, how long do you want your trousers to be? We're going to measure our outer seam. Make sure you're standing up, starting from your waist. Put your tape down to the point you want your trousers to end. You might be making a full length trousers like I am, 3/4 to the knee. But also keep in mind if you like wearing heels, you might want your trouser length to be slightly taller, so go on your tippy toes and then measure where you actually want your trousers to end if you're wearing heels. You can also take your inner seam. Your inner seam is the same thing, but this time you're starting from where your crotch ends. So you're going to go from your crotch all the way to the same point you want your trousers to end. You can use this as a checking measurement later to make sure all your other measurements add up. We also want our thigh circumference. Find the thickest part of your thighs. This is normally 1 to 2 inches below your crotch. Make sure it's not too tight. You should only be able to get about 1 finger in. Bend your knee to make sure it's comfortable. And make sure that your tape is horizontal to the floor. Next, you might have guessed it, we actually want to take the thigh to the waist. So like before, keep your hand at the point you just measured, or if you want to take some chalk and put a little marker there, you can wash it off later. And then take your tape and take it vertically upwards all the way to your waist and measure that down as centimeters or inches. Make sure you write down thigh to waist so you know what this measurement was. Optional measurements are your knee circumference and your ankle circumference. I'm not going to take that because the trousers we're making is going to be a straight leg, so it does not need to be fitted at those 2 points. The final measurement we need is the crotch extension. This is different from the crotch depth when we sat down and the crotch length that we wrapped around. The crotch extension is the width of your crotch. Now we are going to use some calculations to help us find this measurement. So later on when I tell you how to divide your measurements, we're going to make a note of this particular one. Let's prepare our measurements. We're going to divide and adjust them. My tip is to write down your measurements exactly as you recorded them. Then in another column, write down any adjustments, which is what you're actually going to use when you're drafting. So this is a rundown of what you need to do. Your waist circumference needs to be divided by 4. Your hip circumference needs to be divided by 4. Your thigh circumference needs to be divided by 2. Your hip to waist length is fine as it is. Your thigh to waist length is fine as it is. Your crotch depth, when we sat down, I already mentioned take it from your waist to the table and add 1 inch, so you can put that next to it. Your crotch length, you're going to leave that as it is. The important part though is your crotch extension. Your crotch extension is your hip circumference divided by 16. The thickness of your hip determines how wide your crotch is. So whatever your hip circumference, not your waist, whatever your hip circumference is, divide that by 16, and this will help you know. Standardly, if your measurement, once you divided it by 16, is anything less than 2 inches, just double check your hip measurement. And if everything's correct and you've divided it correctly, make sure you use at least 2 inches for your crotch extension, or you use your hip divided by 16, whichever one's bigger. Your crotch extension will decide this little dip right here in your trousers, which helps it sit comfortably. Your outer seam, leave that as it is. Your inner seam, leave that as it is, because that is your length that you want. We already decided that our waistband depth is going to be 1 inch. And also just keep in mind, for when we start sewing, you want your zip to be at least 9 inches long, so that you have enough room to put your trousers on and off. So next, why do we divide what we divide? At this point, you've got the major tips you need to for measuring yourself, but some of you might want to know why. Knowing why is what's going to make you a better sewer, because now you can adapt to measurements based on the unique things you want to make. Why did we divide some measurements by 2, some by 4, and some we didn't divide at all? Well, classically, trousers patterns are made of 4 main panels. Your front 2 panels and the back 2 panels. The front 2 can be made together, can be drafted together because they're normally symmetrical. The same as the back 2. You can draft it once and then make it symmetrical or reflect it, and you get the 2 back pieces. If you're focusing on one of those panels out of the 4, you're only sewing a quarter then. This is why some pieces need to be divided by 4. For example, your hip wraps around the front and the back, so it cuts across all 4 panels. Your waist also cuts across all 4 panels. Hence, those are divided by 4. Some measurements only cut across 2 of the panels. For example, your thigh. Your thigh circumference covers 1 front panel and 1 back panel, so just 2 of the panels. That's why for your thigh circumference, we need to divide that by 2, not 4, because it just wraps around 2 panels. So why don't we divide some? Well, some, like your trousers length or the outer seam, just cut across 1 panel, so you don't need to divide them at all. Well, what is ease and why do we have it? We want our trousers to be snug in some areas, but that measurement isn't stationary. Because we're standing or sitting, you might actually need more room in your fabric so that you're comfortable. Ease is not sewing allowance. Sewing allowance is additional measurements added to your fabric and your pattern so that when you sew it, it still fits you. Ease is different. Ease is included in the material, and it's so that you can comfortably move around. Some examples of where ease will be needed is your hip, your crotch length, and your crotch depth. In fact, I already told you about the ease for the crotch depth, which is adding 1 inch. The rest of the eases, I'm going to show you how to add them as we're actually making the pattern block. The final section of this very detailed video is how to double check your measurement. Lay out your trousers and make sure it's zipped up. You want to check your waist circumference. You're going to pretend that your trousers is an actual person and generally measure this as you measured yourself. You can also do this for your hip circumference. Generally look for the widest part of your trousers. Like we do with our bodies, I kept a note of where the waistline was and measured this from the waistband to the hip so I could check my waist to hip measurement. You can also check the length of your trousers, especially if you're someone who wears heels and you're not sure how long extra to make your trousers. This would be a good test for you. If you find where your crotch is, which is the center of the front, you can then also measure your inner seam. This is useful for checking that your crotch depth is correct. Your crotch depth and your inner seam should generally add up to the length of your trousers, your outer seam. If you then spread this out and get the thickest part of the thigh, which is normally about 1 or 2 inches below your crotch, you can also make sure your thigh measurement is correct. Now in this area, if you have a straight leg, you might find that this measurement is about 1 inch to 2 inches more than yours, but later on we are going to add ease, so don't get thrown off by that. You're just looking for painstakingly, obviously different measurements that signify that you need to redo what you need to do. Next, we're going to take the crotch length. So first I'm going to focus on the front. Notice how the trousers is laid down and I'm really letting that curve shine. Then you're going to place your tape at the top, at the center where your waist is, and then measure that round. Take your time, curve the tape if you need to, and then mark it. You can do the same thing for the back. You really want that curve to be extended and as sticking out as possible so you get the full measurement. Now, we did not take our back crotch length, we took our full length. But if you add the trousers front to the trousers back, that should generally be about the same as your own crotch length. Now, I found that my crotch length going from front to back was slightly longer than the trousers, which made sense because I quite like my waist at my belly button or just higher, so mine would be slightly longer. Now you want to take the crotch depth and extension. This is the step that really helped me. Notice how I'm laying it flat and I am taking that crotch length and poking it up and then laying it so the curve is really as true to form as possible. First, let's take the crotch depth. You want to find where the curve ends and kind of mark it across with your hand. You're going to take straight from the waist and measure it down straight until the curve ends. This will be a gauge for your crotch depth. Now notice we added an inch on, so again, it should be generally around the same, but it's a guideline. If you then take where the curve is going straight down and start looking where it curves, that line there is your crotch extension. So kind of pretend that you're drawing the crotch down straight, look at where it starts curving and measure that difference. This is what helped me realize that my crotch extension was wrong. So you're not going to curve it, you just want to measure straight across and then just use that to check. To help me stay organized, I actually recorded all my measurements on a computer because I just found that easier. I know this video was very detailed. You guys will be surprised how long it's taken me to put all this together, but I really wanted to do you right and give you a very informative and useful tutorial. I do make this content for free, but if you'd like to support me in any way you can, please do use the links below. For the cost of a coffee a month, you can easily encourage me to continue making this content. I would love to be posting weekly, but at this stage, I've realized that to make this kind of video with this depth of quality, I just cannot put that into a weekly post. So again, the amount of ways you can support me so I can do this even more and give more of my time to this, it would be fantastic. Do remember to share this video with your creative communities out there and also continue to grow this wonderful community we have here by sharing your knowledge, your comments, your questions and your requests below. Check out the website and check out CreatedIAm on Instagram. Stay tuned for the upcoming videos, and as you sew and as you create, remember that you are wonderfully created.